Well, here we go for week 22 as we continue to work our way through the book of Psalms. Now, as you've been reading the Psalms, you may have noticed these different headings, what is called a superscription. And so these kind of range in description. Sometimes it's very short. It'll just say something like, to the choir master, a psalm of David. Others may say a psalm of David on stringed instruments. But at different points, we were actually given more detail. So Psalm 3, for example, shows about how David was betrayed by his son Absalom. In Psalm 51, it's really referencing this episode with David and Bathsheba, where there was murder and adultery. And so we can use those superscriptions and go back to the story and read about that episode in David's life. And it's very helpful as we work through that psalm and maybe all the different emotions that he faced. But I also want to mention this. There's 150 Psalms, and 116 have the superscription. So many don't, and again, many just have kind of a short little description. So it's really not very helpful. Now, with some of these Psalms, though we're given a superscription, it's really pretty general. And so as we work our way through some of the Psalms, such as one from David, he talks about his foes and his enemies and all this distress. And I personally, I'm trying to kind of connect, okay, what time period was this from in David's life? And I can get too specific. Well, I was helped by a commentator who made this point, and he actually made it from the life of the Apostle Paul. Now, what we find in 2 Corinthians chapter 12 is that Paul is speaking, and he has been given all these kind of visions and wonderful things that the Lord has revealed to him. But in that same chapter, he says that he was given a thorn in the flesh. And this thorn in the flesh was given to him to keep him humble and to rely on God's grace. Now, there's all sorts of speculation about this thorn in the flesh for Paul. If you go to the letter of Galatians, it appears that Paul had some type of eye issue. He talks about the Galatians plucking out their eyes and giving them to him. Other scholars think that maybe this thorn in the flesh was actually the Corinthian church. They were a very difficult church, and so maybe they were the thorn in the flesh. But we just don't know. And the point that this scholar is making is because we don't know the actual issue with Paul, that's a good thing. Because we could read that and say, I don't have a physical ailment, so I can just kind of disregard this. But because it's not specific, it's universal, and we can apply this to everybody's life. And so in times of difficulty or maybe where we need to live more humbly, we need to rely on God's grace. And so this is what we see with these Psalms where David speaks of foes and enemies and distress. And we can, again, read it and try to figure out, okay, how does this apply to David's life? But again, we need to remember it's written in a general way. It's written to be read universally. And so we may not have the exact foe or enemy of David, but we may have difficult relationships in our family or at work. We may have some type of other issue. And so as we're reading that, again, because we don't know the exact situation of David, we can now apply it to our life.